Hello and welcome. In this video, let's understand how we can implement JWT authentication in our .NET-based web APIs. First, let's understand how JWT authentication will work. So basically, we have some protected resource at server that we want to protect using JWT authentication. So client is asking for a resource, right? So this is our client and this client wants to access some resource that is protected. So what will happen if client directly sends a request, we will reject it because client is not sending the token to us. And for client to generate a token, first it needs to communicate with the identity server. Identity server is someone who will validate the user. It will take the username and password from the client and it will validate it. If the username and password is proper, then it will generate a token and send it back to the client. Once the token is provided to the client, now client use this token and add that to the request. Normally, this token will be sent as an HTTP header. So once we have sent this request with the token, then our web API will validate this token. And if the token is valid, then we will respond to the client with the proper data which they are requesting. So on high level, this is how a JWT authentication will work. Now, let's go to Visual Studio and try to create this identity server and a web API and try to protect our resources using JWT authentication. So I have opened up my Visual Studio and let's create an empty solution and start from scratch. So I will click on new project and I will select a blank solution here. I will give my solution a name that will be auth demo and I will click on create. My solution is created and currently I don't have anything in my solution. Okay, so first we will create an identity server. Identity server is responsible for validating the username and password, and identity server will generate an JWT token if the username and passwords are valid. So let's right click on this and select add here and click on new project. I want to create a web API project. So I will search for API and I will select this first option that says ASP.NET Core Web API. I'll click on next and I will call it app.identity and I will click on next. Here I can change my framework. So I am using .NET 9 and if you want to use some other version, you can change it right here. Okay. And I will keep everything as default and I will click on create. Within few seconds, this will create a new web API project for you. And as default, it will give you a default weather forecast API also. If you go to controller, you can see there is one default controller available for us. What I will do, I will just delete this controller and I will delete this model class also. We don't need this in this project, right? Now, first we need to create a service that can take username and password and validate that. And if the validation is successful, then it will generate a web-based token for you. So what I will do, I will right click on my app.identity project. I will just say a new folder. I want to add a new folder because I want to add all my services in this particular folder. In this folder, I will create an interface first. I will go ahead, click on add and click on new item. And I will say interface. And the name of the interface will be JWT Authentication Manager. So I will give this name and I will click on add. This will create an interface for me. And it will have only one signature that will be an authenticate method that will return a string, and this string will be nothing but our JWT token, and it will receive two parameters, that is username and password. Based on this username and password, we will validate the user. Let's save this and now create a class that will implement this interface. I will right click, I will click on add and I will say class. and the class name will be JWT Authentication Manager. I will click on it. It will create a class for me, and I will implement JWT Authentication Manager interface right here. Right. Currently, we are not implementing the method that is available in our interface. So let's do one thing. Click on this interface, press Ctrl plus dot, and click on Implement Interface. It will add that method for us. And to validate a username and password, we should have some repository to which we can check if the username and password are valid or not. Normally, this could be a database, or this could be an external web API that we can invoke and check if the username and password are valid or not. But for the simplicity, I will create a dictionary here, and in that dictionary, I will keep the username and password. But of course, this is not the best practice, but for demo purpose, this is fine. We will have a dictionary in this class, and from that dictionary, we will try to validate our username and password. So let me create a dictionary. Okay, so I've created this dictionary, right? And the key type is string and the value type is also string, right? And I have added the username and password here. So the username is test1 and the password is password1. Similarly, I have second user that is test2 and password is password2. So currently I have these two users in my dictionary. Now start validating this username and password. So I'm checking if any user is available, which is having key as this username and value as this password. If it is not available, so I will use a not operator here. If we don't have anything here, what I will do, I will return a null. But if we found any user here, then we need to actually go ahead and generate a token for the user, right? So we need to generate a token. And to generate a token, we need to use this particular library, that is System.IdentityModel.Tokens.Jwt. So let's go back to our Visual Studio. I will click on dependency and I will click on manage NuGet packages, and I will search for JWT. And we need this particular library that says System.IdentityModel.Tokens.Jwt. Using this library, we can generate JWT tokens. So I will click on install and I will click on apply. This will add the particular package to my dependency. So if I check my packages, now I have this particular package installed in my project. Right. Once we have this project, now we can start using it. To generate a token, first we need a token handler. So let's create a variable and set it to a new instance of JWT security token handler. Right. And one thing I have not mentioned you, to generate a token, we should use a key. Using that particular key, we will sign our token, because every token should be signed with a particular key, right? So what I will do for this project, I will add this key in my app settings. But again, this is not the best practice. In the real world scenario, you will be storing your keys in some key vault or some external source, right? This is never a good practice to store your keys in the app settings. But for this demo, I will keep this key in my app settings, right? So I added this JWT authentication parameters here, and I have added a private key here, and you can see this private key. This is private key, which should not be stored in app setting. It should be stored in somewhere very secure place. Because if you lose this key and some hacker get access to this particular key, they can have access to all your protected resources. So we need to make sure this private key is as secured as it can be. So now we have our key also. Now we can go ahead and start creating our token again. So to sign the token, we need a token key. So let's call it token key. And that will be the encrypted format of key that is present in our app settings. So First, we need to get this key from the app settings. To get this key, let's create a constructor and let's assume that key will be injected using the dependency injection here. And I will create a private variable here, private read-only string. And whatever key that we're getting in this constructor, I will set it to that particular key. Right? So using the constructor, we are setting up this key here. Now, let's encode this key and generate a token key. To encode this, we need to use encoding class that is available in System.text namespace. Once that is done, I'll say ASCCI, and I want to get bytes here using the key which we have here. Right? This will give us a token key. Once that is done, we need to create a token descriptor. Token descriptor basically define the properties or the features about the token. So let's start creating a token descriptor. So I will create a variable. I'll call it token descriptor. Right? And it will be a new instance of security token descriptor. And this particular object will take many parameters. First of all, we need to set some claims in our JWT token. Using this claim, the server will know what the data that is available in this token. Normally, we will set username, email, or phone number, those kind of data in that token, so that once the token has reached the server, they can validate and get the data about that user from the claims. So we need to set up this subject property to a new claims identity. This claims identity will take an list of claims. So let's add that list here. And first claim would be the name of the user. So I'll say claim type dot name, and I will set it to the username of that user, right? And we no need to specify this big namespace here, so I'll remove this. Okay, so this is the first thing that we need to set in our token descriptor. Next thing, we need to define when this token will expire. Right? So because we cannot keep our token valid for a lifetime, so we need to specify some time limit. After that time, this token will be expired. Right? So let's set expires property here and set it to datetime dot UTC now dot add hours, and I'll make it valid for 1 hour. So the token that will be generated using this token descriptor will be valid for 1 hour. And of course, you can go ahead and change it to add days, add minutes, and whatever use case you are having, you can change the timing here. The third property that I will set here is signing credentials, right? And I will set it to new signing credential object. And the constructor of this will take two parameters. First one is the key. Right, so the key that we have here, right, we have this token key here that will be passed using a symmetric security key, and I will be passing my token key here. Second thing will be the algorithm that will be used to generate this signature. So I will say security algorithms dot, and I will say HM SA256 signature. So I will be using this particular algorithm to generate the signature using this particular token key. Now we can set some other properties also. For example, I can set issue at, and I can set at what time this token was issued. So I am setting it to the current UTC time. So at this time, this token was issued, right? We can set the issuer here, basically who is issuing this token, right? So for this example, I will just set it to app.identity, right? So this particular issuer is issuing this token, right? Once it is done, we need to set the audience. Audience means who is going to use this token, right? So either we can use audiences property if you want to set multiple audience for your token, but if you want to set a single audience, you can set using this property, and I will set it to app.main. So I have set up the subject, I have set up the expires time, and I have set up the signing credentials and issue date, issuer, and audience. And guys, these two fields are optional. Even if you don't specify this, the token will work. But if you want to explicitly mention the issuer and audience, that you can do here. Specifying this will add some additional security on top of your JWT token. Once that is done, now we can go ahead and create our token using the token handler that we created here. So what I need to do, I need to say where token equal to token handler. So we have this token handler that we have created, and on this I need to call create token method, right? And this create token method will take the token descriptor that we have created here, right? Once we have this token, this will be basically a type of security token, but the return type of this is a string. So let's go ahead and change this token to a string format. For that, we can do return token handler dot write token. Write token will basically convert the token to a string format. If you see the return type here, it returns a string, right? And we can pass our token here. So using these steps, our token will be generated. Let me explain one more time what we are doing here. First of all, we have validated username and password, and if there is no user available with this particular set of username and password, we are returning null from here. But if the user is valid, then we are going ahead and generating a token using this token handler, token key, token descriptor. Once we have these three things, then we are calling create token method on token handler, and we generated a security token. And to serialize this security token to a string format, we have used this write token method, and this will give us a token in string format, and that we are returning from here. Okay, now I think our service is ready. Now we need to create a controller. User can call that controller and pass down the username and password. Okay. Before that, we need to do one more thing. We need to inject this string key here, right, to this class. For that, let's go to program.cs class. Here, let's first try to read this key from our app settings. So I'll say var space key equal to builder dot configuration get section, and the name of the section is JWT Authentication params. You can see here I have specified this particular section name here. So I'll copy this and I'll put it here. From this section, I need to get value, and the type of the value is string, and the property name of the key that I have specified here is private key. So let's copy this again and put it right here. Okay. So using this, we can get the key from our app settings. And if this key is null here, then we can throw a new exception. Once we have the key here, now let's inject this key to this particular class. For that, we can use our services. So just after adding the controllers, I will say builder.services.add singleton, and this will be of type JWT Authenticate Manager, and I need to pass JWT Authentication Manager object here, and I need to pass the key to the constructor. Using this, the key will be injected to our this particular class. Now let's create the controller. I will right click on my controllers method and I will click on add and I will click on controller. Here I need to select the MVC controller empty and click on add. I will name it identity controller. So let's specify this is a API controller here, right? And specify the route also. So I want to access this controller at API path. So I'll say API slash, and I need to specify at the class level. So I'll cut this from here and put it right here. So now let's create a constructor also. And because in this controller, I want to access this particular method and it is available in the JWT Authentication Manager. So I need to inject an instance of this class in our constructor and let's call it JWT Authentication Manager. And so I have injected this JWT Authentication Manager here. We can start using it. So I will call this method as HTTP post because I want to send the username and password in the request body. And I will call it allow anonymous so that anyone without any token can call this particular API and generate a token, right? I'll call it authenticate and name that they should use to call this endpoint. That will be also authenticate, right? Once that is done, I need to receive username and password from request body. So I will say from body, right? And from body, I need to receive a string of. Actually, do one thing. Instead of specifying the username and password here directly, we'll create a class that will actually have the property of username and password. So right click here and click on add and click on class. I'll call my class as user credentials. Once this class is ready, I'll add two properties here, that is username and password. Okay, now let's use this class in our controller. So I will be expecting a user credential here like this, right? Now we have the user credential in our controller. Now what we need to do, we need to call our method and authenticate this username and password. So I'll say where space token, call my authenticate method for my service class, and I will be passing the username, that is credentials username and user credentials. And if the token is null, meaning the user is not a valid user, then we need to return unauthorized, right? And if the token is valid, then we can return our token. Now our identity server is ready. Now we can go ahead and test it. Let's run this project. Okay, my project is running and it is running at 7163 port. So let's open Postman. Once Postman is opened, you can click on new and click on HTTP request. Here we want to do one post request. So I will select post here and I will copy the URL from here and I will paste the URL here. Endpoint that I want to access is this particular one and it is available at API slash controller slash authenticate. So let's provide this particular path here, API slash identity slash authenticate, right? And we need to pass the username and password in the request body. So I will select body here. I will click on row here and change it to JSON. And I will be specifying a JSON here. So the username, let's call it test1, password, let's call it password1, right? So this is our request body. Now let's try to send this data. And as you can see, we are able to generate a JWT token here because this particular username and password was available in our this particular class. If you see here, we were having this test1 and password1 in our dictionary. But if I change my password or username here, let's say I'll say test2 here. Now there is no user with this username and password. And if we try to send it, I'll receive this unauthorized and it will say 401, right? But if I provide a valid username and password, I will again get the token here. And what you can do, right? You can copy this token, this particular website, right? And remove this and paste the token here. And you can see the properties that was set as part of this token. You can see here, unique name is test2 because the claim that we have set here, right? That we have set it to the username. Here we have expiry date. So after this time, this token will expire. And this is the time when this token was issued. So this is IA at, meaning issued at. ISS means issuer, who has issued this token. So that is app.identity. And the audience also that we have specified in our program, that is app.main. Right. So this is how you can create JWT token using a web API. So that's it for this video, guys. In the next video, we will understand how we can utilize this app.identity project and use this token that is generated here and protect our APIs using JWT authentication.